Hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Subitch, talking to you from the historic Hartley Mansion here on Rucker Avenue in Everett, where I'm going to give you some of the background of the medical anesthesia group that I was a member of for 40 years, and also some little stories about the group and some of my background in anesthesia. I'm originally from Waukesha, Wisconsin, and I grew up on a vegetable farm. My dad grew radish, onions, carrots, parsley, and all those sorts of things. And we walked around in that black dirt and got plenty dirty and sweaty and hot, and I swore that I would get out of there eventually and get a better job. And I was fortunate to find one. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin, and I received my medical degree in 1956. After that, I interned in Sacred Heart Hospital at Eugene, Oregon, in a rotating internship. Those were the days when you could take a little bit of everything and you didn't have to decide in the second year of medical school what you were going to be for the rest of your life. At that time, the Korean War had been on, actually it was no longer on, but I was deferred for the Korean War when I was in pre-medical training. So this made me eligible for the draft when I finished internship. I was given a decision if I wanted to join the military right away or try to get a deferment and be assigned to a residency program and then be taken into the military after that. Since I was unsure what my actual course of practice would be, I decided to go into the military for 2 years, and I became a general medical officer in the United States Air Force stationed at Charleston, South Carolina. I found out that I didn't want to become a pediatrician after taking care of many runny noses and runny ears and so forth. And also I didn't want to be an ENT doctor, which was another thought that I had had. Because of my schooling at Wisconsin, which had the first anesthesia residency in the United States, I had a special interest in anesthesia. The department there was very good to the students, allowing us to actually do some things, whereas all the other specialties, you were usually the low man on the totem pole holding a retractor for surgery and doing the physicals and other scut work around the hospital. I stayed at the University of Wisconsin for my residency for 2 years and then became a member of the staff there for 1 year as an instructor. I had visions of perhaps going into teaching, but I found out that I would rather do than teach, and so I left that position and came to Everett, Washington in 1962. I followed Dr. Charles Gildner here from Wisconsin. Chuck had been an instructor in the department for 1 year, just as I had been, and he had also taken his residency there. He was an avid sailor, and he was looking for a place on the northwest coast, and he just happened on these two young fellows named Dr. Donald Weiss and Gene Mason, who had started an anesthesia group here in Everett, and it looked like a good position to join. I became the fourth member of this illustrious group, and it was a very interesting arrangement. It was an easy call schedule to figure out in those days. You were on call Tuesday and Thursday 1 week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday the next week. After another year, we did add a fifth member to the group, so then it did change the schedule somewhat. Our cases started mostly at 7 o'clock in the morning because we had a lot of general practice surgeons doing surgery, and they had to get back to their offices, so we would start at 7, work like heck till mid-morning, and then we'd take a little break, and then after office hours we'd start operating again, so we had a hiatus in the middle of the day. This allowed us to go down to the local Elks Club and play a little squash and handball and take in the sauna and so on. in later life, this was no longer available, and because we worked all day long, but it was interesting at that time. The fee schedule in those days was also somewhat interesting. We stood on firm ground that we would not do a case for less than $25. For those of you in practice today, this should be somewhat humorous. Our group gradually grew, and because of this, the hospital found it necessary to get rid of their nurse anesthetists. They, like many hospitals throughout the country, they had hired nurse anesthetists to do the anesthesia because there were no anesthesiologists around. They were unsupervised at that time because there was no one here to supervise them. They essentially were under the direction of the surgeon. Because we needed some help initially to begin with, and also because the old general practice surgeons had a good relationship with the nurses, we decided to hire one nurse at each hospital. Some of this was due to some interesting facts. One of the ENT doctors would not allow us to do his tonsillectomy procedures, or correction, give anesthesia for his TNAs, because he did not want us to intubate the patients. And we stood firmly that we would not do those cases without an endotracheal tube. He happened to have one of the older nurse anesthetists in the community do his cases with an ether hook, which was a little hook that was placed in the mouth over the lip, and it anesthetized, kept the patient anesthetized as well as the anesthetist and the surgeon. It so happened that the nurse went on vacation for some period of time, and the doctor had several tonsillectomies that needed to be done, and so he had no one else to do them other than the member of our group. I can't remember which one did the cases, but we did intubate, and when the nurse came back to town, he told her from now on all of his tonsillectomies would be intubated. So it took some time to convince many of the physicians that we did have things to offer. The original members of the group, Dr. Mason and Weiss, were trained by Dr. Bonica in Tacoma, and he was well known for his expertise in regional anesthesia. Our group was very interested in regional anesthesia, and Dr. Gildner and I had significant background in this at Wisconsin because of a member of the staff there who had a similar interest. Because of this, we did lots and lots of spinals, epidurals, brachial plexus blocks, axillary blocks, etc., etc. And our group became known as the regional anesthesia of the upper Northwest. Our group gradually grew over the years. Dr. Ronald Marr joined us in 1963, and we had various members of the join the group over the years that did not stay with us, but ultimately the group grew to be quite large. I will probably be unable to give you the exact rotation or sequence of these members, but there was a Dr. Phyllis Bagdy who joined our group for a short period of time, but she married a radiologist on the east side of the Lake Washington, and he developed a practice in Kirkland, so she went to the Evergreen Hospital. Shortly thereafter, we had a Dr. Whetstone join us, and his wife also practiced with us for a short period of time before going to Evergreen Hospital. Scott was an interesting fellow because he was trained as an aeronautical engineer but decided that he'd rather go to medical school, and trained at the University of Wisconsin where he met his wife. Scott was one of our earlier retirees from our group. I'm going to diverge a little bit at the present time since I mentioned retirement. The Hartley Mansion where I'm giving this presentation was the site of my retirement almost, well, a little over 7 years ago. However, my retirement was short-lived. I received a call from one of the locum tenens agencies after about 6 months and asking if I was interested in going back to work, and I jumped at the chance. And since that time I have been doing a significant amount of locums work in this community and the surrounding communities in Arizona and in Alaska. In fact, today, which is Mother's Day of 2009, I happen to be on call at the Monroe Hospital. I enjoyed my practice in Everett for 40 years. I met many interesting people. The surgeons were wonderful, although we always had a saying, surgery would be great if it weren't for surgeons, but that was just nonsense. The patients and the surgeons have been a real joy as far as I was concerned, and this is one of the reasons I came out of permanent retirement to be in semi-retirement. I still enjoy the work. It is demanding but entertaining and stimulating.